Hello everyone and welcome to our class. This is the first lesson in music for quarter 1 and what we're going to talk about today is the early Western music history and timeline. So have you ever wondered what exactly Western music is or how it has changed over time? So in this lesson, we will answer both these questions and more as we explore the history of Western music. The term Western refers to European traditions and social structures that has come to include societies that were established and shaped primarily by European immigrants, so such as those in the Americas. So thus, Western music may be defined as an organized instrumentation and sound created and produced in Europe, US, and other societies established and shaped by European immigrants. Primarily, there are 6 eras in early Western music history, namely the Ancient World, Medieval Era, Renaissance Era, Baroque Era, Classical Era, and the Romantic Era. So in this quarter, we will cover the 4 early periods of Western music from the music of the Ancient World up to the Baroque Era. And by the way, I would greatly appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel where I post all the lessons in MAPE Grade 9. And if you like this video, please leave a like and comment after the lecture has ended. So let's get started. The history of Western music is rooted in Greek and Roman antiquity, though music existed in virtually every culture long before this. Nevertheless, music was an important part of the lives of the ancient Greeks. So Greek philosophers wrote about the power of music, and there are mathematicians and Greek playwrights such as Sophocles and Aristophanes that used their music in their tragedies and comedies. The Greeks and Romans had many musical instruments that includes the lyre, harp, and the corn horn, which were used in a variety of ceremonies and festivals. The Greeks also developed different systems of music notation such as the more general harmonia and the more specific Dorian and Lydian, which were names are after specific tribes and based upon unique modes or specific ordering of musical tones and their corresponding notes. Actually, yung mga binanggit ko na yon, yung Dorian and Lydian, ito yung early scales natin. At tinatawag siya na mode or specific ordering of musical sound. Kung saan nag-originate yung Western scale na alam natin sa ngayon, yung major and minor scale. So all of these help music to thrive, and it probably would have evolved in different way if it hadn't been for 2 major factors. So, kung hindi dahil sa dalawang factor na to, hindi sana magsa-stop yung pag-e-evolve ng music during the time of the ancient period. And what are these 2 major factors? Those are the birth of Christianity, which leads to the medieval era, and the fall of Rome. Wars, famine, and internal disputes caused the ancient world to crumble, giving way to the Middle Ages, or also known as the medieval era. So almost all technological advances vanished when Rome fell. So without effective leaders to organize such complex societies, many people grew poor and lived in relatively isolated villages. And during the time, life is so difficult and the primary focus of people was survival. So few people had time or desire to make music. However, one bright spot in the dark world of the medieval era was the stability provided by the early church. So church leaders recognized the power of music and began using it as a tool for meditation and prayer. Thus, religious music was invented. And this religious music that the church introduced during the time is what we call plain chant. So what is plain chant? It is music that consisted of a single melody sung in Latin, which is the language of the church. Because musical instruments were associated with the pagan culture of Greeks and Romans, church leaders did not approve of their use. So bawal ang musical instrument during the time of medieval era. Therefore, all plain chant was unaccompanied vocal music, which is known today as the a cappella, a term that basically means in the style of the chapel. So the most famous type of plain chant in this era is what we call Gregorian chant. This was developed under Pope Gregory the Great and sung by Gregorian monks. Gregorian monks also created one of the first standards for musical notation, also known as neumes, or symbols and shapes meant to represent specific pitches. These notes are the forebearers of today's musical notation system. So yung ginagamit natin ngayon ng mga notes, yung staff, ang pinanggalingan talaga niyan, ang kanununuan talaga niyan is yung neumes na tinatawag na kinreate ng mga Gregorian monks. Yan. So it wasn't until the late in medieval era that music began to get more complex than this with the rise of polyphony, or when two or more melodies are played at the same time to create a unified sound. And that leads to another era. So the other era is what we call the Renaissance era. So it started from 1450s up to 1600s. Renaissance means rebirth, and in the Renaissance era, people rediscovered the ideas and technologies of the ancient world. So diba nung panahon na medieval era, parang kinalimutan nila yung mga technologies that were created during the time of the ancient period, kasi nga parang sinasabi na that is paganistic in nature. But during the time of Renaissance era, people try to rediscover these ideas and technologies that died during the time of medieval period. So society developed into more distinct social classes, and educated citizens were expected to be proficient in music. So that's another thing. Nagkaroon ng development sa society, nagkaroon ng different social classes, and the advent of printing allowed music to become increasingly accessible, and a wide variety of styles and genres of music emerged as composers started sharing their ideas. So that's another distinct happening during the time of Renaissance period, na imbento yung printing press. So because of printing press, mas laging accessible yung mga musical scores, at yun ang dahilan kung bakit nagkaroon ng variety of styles and genres in music. Renaissance composers developed the single melody plain chant by combining several complex melodies at once. So dati kasi diba, during the time of medieval era, single melody lang yung plain chant. Pero during the time of Renaissance period, nagtry sila na i-combine yung several melodies together. Kaya nga nagkaroon na tinatawag natin na polyphony. Yun, or two or more melodies sounding together. And some upper-class citizens hired musicians and composers as resident members of their courts. Thus, secular music thrived during this era and was often played by small groups of musicians known as consorts. So dahil nga nagkaroon na ng mga different social classes during the time, yung mga mayayaman, nagkaroon sila ng kakayahan na mag-hire ng mga musicians na magpe-perform sa kanilang mga bahay. And this small group of musicians were known as consorts. Polyphonic sound thrived during the time of Renaissance period, which can be seen in multi-melodic work of Dufay. However, music meant for the church continued to be popular, and composers like Monteverdi wrote religiously inspired yet polyphonically conservative pieces such as the famous Vespers of the Blessed Virgin. So yun yung isa sa major contribution ng Renaissance period. Nagkaroon ng polyphonic sound during the Renaissance period, wherein yung dating single melody o isang tono lang, nagkaroon na siya ng mga two or more melodies sounding together. Na yun yung ginagawa ng mga choir. Kaya nga sinasabi na itong daw Renaissance period is the golden age of a cappella, kung saan na-develop yung choral music na hanggang sa ngayon na-experience pa rin natin. And aside from that, nagkaroon ng mga group of musicians who will perform, at unti-unti na nag-click yung konsepto ng secular music. Pag sinabi natin secular music, ito yung music that is not associated to religion or something that is, sinasabi natin na worldly music. Anything that is not religious, that is what we call secular music. And the last period that we are going to talk about today is the Baroque era. It started in 1600 and ended in 1750s. So the Baroque era was characterized by an obsession with decorations and added frills to just about everything, and music was no exception. Actually, the term na Baroque, it came from a Portuguese word, barroco, which means irregularly shaped pearl. And this period is characterized by obsession with decoration. Kaya nga, overly ornamented. Lahat ng mga bagay na makikita natin na create during the Baroque period, from statues to paintings to architectural design. And yung music, hindi siya nakaligtas doon. Even yung music was characterized by an obsession with too much decoration. So it became more elaborate, complex, and difficult to perform. Kumbaga, mas lalong humirap siyang tugtugin. Kasi kailangan sobrang elaborate, kailangan bongga yung tugtog, and musicians such as Bach would improvise on early complex melodies, adding musical embellishment or mga patagdag na pampaganda dun sa music that show off their skill. So ang idea during the time of Baroque period is you have to show off your skills. Thus, yung context of improvisation was established during the time of Baroque era. Pag sinabi natin improvisation, yun yung parang hina-highlight nung nag-i-improvise siya or hina-highlight nung performer yung galing niya na parang on the spot. Okay? So, in fact, Bach and Handel are perhaps the most important composers of this era. Ito dalawang sikat na to na composer from the Baroque era is si Johann Sebastian Bach at saka si J.S. Handel. Si George Frederick Handel pala, sorry. So with the former's sacred composition including Masses and Passions become quite famous, and the latter's more secularized operas and cantatas being equally known. So si Bach, kilala siya sa pag-create niya ng mga sacred composition para sa Mass at saka Passion, and then si Handel naman, kilala naman siya sa mga secularized operas and cantatas. So opera was also born during this era, the Baroque era, and the Renaissance consort grew into small orchestra. Di ba nung tatay ng Renaissance, mayroon tayo tinatawag na small group of musicians, we call them consorts. Ito tong consorts na to, nung pumasok yung Baroque era, they are now called orchestra. Okay? So the dramatic spirit of Baroque era also saw the creation of the sonata and concerto. These are two instrumental styles of Western music that are heavily reliant on violin and cello. So these popular styles and their specific instrumentation also influence the sound of the orchestra. So in summary, early Western music history is classified as medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque. So each period has its own distinct characteristics, historical, and cultural background. Noong time ng medieval era, they use this type of music called Gregorian chant, that is also known as plain song or plain chant, and it was created for the purpose of contributing to the spirit of worship to the early Christian churches. The music of the Renaissance period, on the other hand, become an important entertainment and leisure activity. So kung sa medieval era is more on sacred music, the time ng Renaissance period, it's more on secular music. Members of the upper class were expected to have received musical training, and polyphony was invented during that time. Also, during the Baroque period, this is characterized by elaborate sculptures, theaters, arts, and music. So yung music is hindi siya naka-escape dun sa extreme ornamentation nung panahon ng Baroque era. So marami mga musical styles that emerged during the Baroque period. One is the opera, and we have oratorio, and we have different concertos, and even yung chorale that flourished during the time of the Baroque period. So that ends our discussion for today, and I hope that you learned something from me. And if you have any questions regarding our topic, just type it on the comment box and I will try to answer all your concerns. Again, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you again next time.